all, I could very easily get used to that response. Hello, thanks Colin. Welcome to Rough Trade East. My name's Graham Duff, and we're here today to celebrate the launch of special editions of three of Wire's very seminal and influential albums, namely Pink Flag, Chairs Missing, and 154. And I'm very conscious that I shouldn't really talk too much, because on stage we're going to have six very articulate and opinionated's probably the wrong word. No, actually opinionated's the right word. Six very opinionated and articulate people. So please welcome to the stage, first of all, John Wozencroft, founder of Touch Music. Not Mute. Author and documentary maker John Savage. And from Wire, Graham Lewis. Colin Newman. Bruce Gilbert. And Robert Gray.
No.
We can swap halfway through. We can shuffle around.
Well, I've gone floppy this morning.
It's all gone articulate.
So, gentlemen, thank
Hello.
you.
Should we go into airline mode?
Oh yeah, and mobiles up. Mobiles up.
Mobiles up. No taking photos.
So the first thing I wanted to say really was, across those first three albums, there's a real feeling of acceleration. From Pink Flag to 154, you're accelerating through so many different ideas, so many modes of expression. On the first album, some of the songs, they're accelerating at such a speed, they make the Ramones look stately. But the key thing for me is 5 months after your first gig as a four-piece, you've been signed to the biggest record company in the world, and you're recording your debut album. Were you aware of how fast things were moving? Bruce, can I ask you, were you aware?
I suppose it didn't seem particularly fast at the time. It seemed very, well, we kind of expected it in a strange sort of arrogant way.
Well, because you were very confident in what you were doing.
I suppose we were, yeah.
It's quite strange, really, because we were rather busy before EMI interrupted our course. And I think it's strange that really that's where it started from there, was the fact that that was the way we went on with it, really. It was like, that's what we did. And we said, no, we don't want to make two singles, we want to make an album. So that was that. So.
And were EMI amenable to that? Did they kick up a fuss, or did you get your own way quite easily?
I mean, that was the reason why we went there.
There was no whinging.
We could have gone to another label that would have put out a single.
Yeah.
But that didn't seem to appeal. We wanted to do it. We had enough material for an album, so we just thought, well, why don't we do that?
We'd had a good offer from Dave Fudger. Dave said he'd put out a single. Would you recommend him?
He was in the Snivelling Shits, wasn't
He was a sound journalist.
Enough said, really.
he? He was a Snivelling Shit. So, in capitals.
Editor of Sounds.
So, Robert, you told me when we were talking for the special editions that you tried to convince everybody else that it was a little bit too soon to record Pink Flag, that the band should wait.
Yeah, I thought I could have used a bit more time to learn to play better. Having it all recorded and it be there forever, it just seemed... well, we were still improving, so... Was there a rush already? Well, there was, I suppose, but... we did it, didn't we? So
You did. There's no going back now.
I was going to say, you were the one who was pushy about playing live. I didn't think we were ready, but you were very keen on playing.
Live, yeah, but that's different to being recorded, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Or is it? Well, as it turns out, I suppose. We were playing our live set in the studio, so...
It's all about the context of improving, isn't it?
Yeah. But presumably one of the imperatives to actually get that material recorded was because you were already generating a whole body of other work your sound palette and stuff was expanding. So I suppose you had to record that first batch of songs before you lost interest. Would that be a fair assumption?
I think we're kind of slightly ignoring the elephant in the room, which is George. I mean, the fact that we dumped our founding member and had to write a new bunch of material because we couldn't play his material because that kind of, A, it wasn't that good, and B, that was a bit weird. So that all material was all written really fast. I mean, we sacked George in the February. By the September we were recording Pink Flag, and all that material was written in between the two. In between those two periods. Why would you stop once you got the taste of it? It's like, oh, well, do that, write something, band plays it, yeah, that's good, we play it live, let's just try something else. Oh, this is different, let's go there instead. It just seemed, it's all very organic and natural. But I think there's that impetus of needing, a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and it had to be filled with something. We wanted to do it. We knew somehow, even though it was a big mess with George, and it wasn't entirely an attractive object, we felt between us we had something. And I think what convinced us was when we rehearsed without him. That was like, yeah, we've got something here. That's really good. Now we need to back it up with having the material, and everything else just fell into place after that. It seemed like it was a natural and logical development.
I always thought at the time we better do it quick, otherwise we're going to really lose interest, or just disappear, just evaporate, because we're doing a lot of stuff.
No.
John, which one? John, Mr. Savage, you saw why. You saw why very early on, and in one of your earliest reviews of why you referred to mod. So there's a reference to them almost being mod. Was that due to the attention to detail, the editing?
Well, I saw them at the Roxy. Must have been one of those. I think it was early April, wasn't it? Early April.
It was
77.
One of the first.
It was the big Roxy Festival, and so you were seeing a lot of punk groups, and most of them were really bad. There was a particularly bad one I remember called the Unwanted.
They were genius.
They couldn't even stop and start at the same time. I know there's a virtue to be made out of that, but obviously what I thought about Wire was that they really knew what they were doing, and they already had an aesthetic, which wasn't a particularly trendy thing to say at that moment, but obviously I was interested in that because I was into the art of it. And so, there's something very different, because a lot of the punk stuff was great because it was thrash, but it's not going to last very long. So, and I remember you, Graham, told somebody to fuck off. In a very at the end of the set, saying, "Oh, fuck off!" Oh, fuck off! It's great. That's what people
did they go?
They probably said, "Fuck off, man."
Oh, fuck off again then.
That first night at the Roxy, we can't have played to more than 6 people. I mean, we were bottom of the bill. I mean, it's literally it's recorded, but and they invited us back the next night, and we moved up the bill 2 places. I mean, that's just crazy.
But you do have to realise how many punks there were in London then.
So when the Roxy was full, how many people would be in the audience?
150. Pretty packed.
Right.
That was Heartbreakers.
That's Heartbreakers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right.
Something like the Heartbreakers or the Damned when they got going. And I interviewed. In fact, I did a very early interview with Wire because it was one of the first things I ever did with sounds. And the editor there was Dave Fudger, who looms large in the story, and he was my supporter of sounds. And he said, "Interview this group called Wire, okay?" And so I phoned up somebody, and I got Mr. Hornsey transfer. And Clive Nice. It was great.
So
You said we're better than everybody because we're pretty. And I thought, I like that. Well, why not?
Did you feel any kinship with any of the other bands that you were playing with on the punk scene?
We weren't playing in many places with anybody.
Full stop.
Full stop.
Yeah, I don't think we had much in common with the other groups that were
I was going to say that live at the Roxy, we saw the Buzzcocks turned up, and the Buzzcocks had suits, and they had white carnations. And we went,
Green. They were green carnations.
Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde, yeah.
and we said, yes.
I mean, most of the other groups, Punk Explosion, so called, were clowns, basically. It was quite sad.
Well, I get the impression a lot of the punks wanted attention for themselves, whereas Wire wanted attention for their work. If you know what I mean.
Right, yeah.
There doesn't seem to be much narcissism in what Wire present. And also, you're not projecting yourself into the audience's fantasies in the way that a lot of the punk bands.
And then it was never about, you know, like to see, you know, like to live their lifestyle. And then, you know, obviously elements of the lifestyle have been lived, but I think for the most part that wasn't the motivation for doing it. It was just like, it was actually about the material. It was like, this is good stuff. We like it. That's what we have in common. That is still what we have in common.
Yes.
You know, we don't have a lot else in common. But at least we have that. You know, it's like, yeah, we can do that thing, and that works.
Yeah. So when you got into the studio first doing demos, what did it feel like hearing yourself as a recorded entity rather than thrashing on a stage? Was it weird?
It was remarkable.
Yeah.
It almost sounded like a group.
It's quite encouraging.
Yeah.
I thought we sounded terrible.
Yeah.
Not
But
until Pink
but
Floyd.
the thing about it was Mike Thorn kept saying encouraging things like, if you have a guitar which stays in tune, you'll find this easier. We were going, but we don't have any money. He said,
Yes,
That was one of the
my
things-
Woolworths took a dive. My Woolworths guitar took a dive.
Yeah.
quite quickly.
So, I mean, I get the impression Mike Thorn was, as the producer, was very, very influential in terms of helping you get to grips with the studio environment.
He was very sympathetic.
Yeah.
I think Mike respected our artistic tendencies, and he helped us with a lot of practicalities, you know, a lot of craft, because there's a lot of craft in the studio which is scary to begin with.
Mm.
And Mike brought us along, and he helped us in that way, and yeah, gave us good advice.
I mean, we knew nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally knew nothing. We didn't know. We didn't know anything about the business of recording. You know, how it was done, what was important. You know, so I mean, that was what we learned. With Pink Flag, we were starting to learn it. With Chairs Missing, we were starting to perfect it. And by 154, everybody had their own idea about how to do it. You know, so that was kind of how it went on.
Mm. No, Mike was tremendous. Sort of nurtured.
So John Wozencroft. So you would have seen Wire first time 78 or thereabout?
No. Talking of clowns, a friend of mine, I went up to university in October 77, and I'd heard the Roxy LP because I was working in record shops in the summer holidays. And this friend of mine said, I've got a spare ticket for this group that are playing in Newcastle called the Tubes. And I wasn't really very interested in the Tubes. And then I twigged that there was this support band called Wire. And I made the connection with the Roxy album. I thought, oh yeah, let's go. So I went to the City Hall. It was a Sunday night on 4th of November, 77. And Wire played, and they played in a kind of completely you kind of way. Now the City Hall is a big stage, and the group were lined up on the stage with quite a lot of distance between them, and there was an obvious stagecraft there immediately. And the Georges, they took this as a personal attack, and once Wire played Field Day for the Sundays, 25 seconds long, they took that as a cue to start throwing stuff onto the stage.
and started shouting, "Fucking wankers, get off, fucking crap, fucking rubbish." So this built
Like
up.
Manchester, doesn't it? You fucking bastards, get the fuck out of here.
This built up to a crescendo, and I think the band were only allowed 25 minutes anyway as the support act. And by the end of it, the whole stalls area was in uproar about this. I thought it was fantastic. So it all started there.
I don't remember anything.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It was pure terror.
We didn't. I don't think we expected anybody to actually like us.
But we never played in front of more than 100 people in the City Hall. There's like 2,000.
Well, I saw that gig, and then I noticed when I came back to London for the Christmas holidays that you were supporting Bethnal in the Nashville Club in Kensington. And I went to that, and it was like a kind of really gloomy day, and I think there were 50 people there.
I don't remember Bethnal at all.
Don't you remember? They were somewhere between the Jam and Shan 69.
Yeah.
They were signed.
I'm surprised you don't remember them.
No, they were really.
I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah. It's embarrassing to imagine we even supported them. That's it.
You mentioned stagecraft there. Is that something you did you critique each other's outfits and so on? What sort of, when you went out to present your stuff, how conscious were you of what you were wearing and so on?
Well, there was a certain amount of input. I mean, certainly into my look in the beginning. Angela, who was Bruce's partner at the time, who was a fashion designer, and she decided that I should be wearing tight trousers and a surgeon's smock and no shoes. But then again, there was some point when somebody said Kermit, because my little skinny legs were sticking out, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start styling myself now. I don't really want to be Kermit, so.
But you had certain rules, didn't you? There was no drinking, no smoking on stage, things like that. There's no a lot of things that other bands just do naturally on stage. You pared back.
Anti-rock and roll. It was just really like when we started. I didn't play guitar live on stage, although I'd in fact kind of written most of the songs. So there was already a strange tension, and I thought, what do singers do on stage? And all of the singers I'd seen on stage, I thought that they looked really stupid. They do all that kind of stuff and twirling the mic, and that I just thought that was real rubbish. So at the beginning, I just thought, okay,
It takes a lot of practice as well.
yeah. What I'll do is I'll just stand completely still.
That's
See
not what you
see
did,
if I can
Colin.
get away with.
That's not what you did. You used to twist your head like a clockwork.
Of course. The thing was, is I would then also have to signal, especially to Rob. Rob was always behind me, and Rob would need cues like, here's the verse and here's the chorus. Because I'd written the songs, I was also giving the cues to Rob and everyone else, like this bit's coming up or something like that. So I would start doing movements that would indicate, here's the chorus, and then that turned into
It's a good job, James Brown didn't know about this previously.
and it turned into a little choreography, and then that was kind of, and it became a thing.
And to try and dodge the
Hit me.
spitting.
Okay, pass go.
Oh, the spitting was just crap, It was just, we supported the Jam. I mean, that was the worst. I mean, I had
Stranglers was worse.
You called them a
Stranglers and
turn.
Stranglers.
Yeah.
That was one of your best phrases. You called the Jam a turn.
Turn. Yeah, they were.
They were.
Yeah, we were, actually, George and I watched them at the Red Cow, and they were playing instead of another band, and we were sitting next to his dad, who was managing them at that time, and that was when they were still in the Burton suits and playing Route 66. I mean, it was all covers. The whole set was covers. I thought they were terrible. And it didn't really get much better.
So,
I think the thing about the aesthetic thing is, I got really shocked. And it was only fairly recently, so 20 years ago or something. Someone introduced me to the Monks, and there were two guys. They were German conceptual artists who invented what the Monks were, and their manifesto was very similar to the aesthetic that Bruce and I talked about. as to how it would look and how clean wire was going to look. Because, going back to what John was saying about everything was thrashy and a mess, and that was exciting. Well, it was.
Yeah.
For about 10 minutes, it was pretty exciting when you saw it at its extreme. But then it was other people impersonating other people who were impersonating other people who were making a mess. Is not very original.
So were the Ramones important at all?
Absolutely.
Of course it was.
First time I saw the Ramones, we all knew we just had to play faster.
Yeah, but
It
then
was
you
simple.
had Lowdown, which was very unusual for that time.
Yeah, I know, but that's obvious then, isn't it? It's like if you can play faster, then you can also say, well, let's play slower. There's a logic.
That was actually the first song that Graham and I wrote together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
The,
that was how it started.
the Ramones just made you laugh. You know what I mean? It was so shocking.
And they had an aesthetic as well, which is interesting.
It was fantastic. I didn't see the Roundhouse show. I saw them at Dingwalls, and it just knocked me over. I was just laughing like an idiot. I was just thinking, this is crazy. And do you remember? I don't know. For those of us who are old enough, in those days, someone invited you round, and they would have. If they didn't have the Ramones album, they would have the Eagles album. But some people had the Ramones album and the last Eagles album.
And Steely Dan.
And Steely Dan. Well, that's going
Absolutely
But you know what I mean? It was like this. Everybody saying, "What's your choice?"
Well, there's a,
I was definitely into both the Ramones and Steely Dan. I hated the Eagles.
that's a given. So can we talk a little bit about Chairs Missing? Because after Pink Flag, a lot of bands would have considered they'd minted their sound, and it was, they would just knock out another one of those. Whereas you went in a very strange direction with Chairs Missing. Bruce, when we talked about this, you said it would have been very easy to do another Pink Flag.
Well, it was simply boring to continue on the same vein.
Yeah.
And all sorts of ideas floating in the band about new ways of approaching stuff. So it just seemed perfectly natural to branch out a little bit. Sonic landscape,
Yeah. It's a very psychedelic album, I think, and sounds increasingly psychedelic.
But I've been told.
Yeah.
So was there a key developmental track? Was there a track?
Yeah, Practice Makes
Practice
Perfect.
Makes Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, Practice Makes Perfect is the one. And that was kind of, I think may have been actually written in December 77. I mean, that was certainly in the set in early 78. So that was the kind of key to it. And the other thing was, of course, we took a collective decision that I would start playing guitar live so we could have two distinct guitar parts. And that somehow made, it possible that this kind of, suddenly, like Pink Flag is very monophonic. Like the kind of guitar and the bass and the voice and the drums, they're all kind of doing the same thing. It's one of its strengths. Whereas Chairs Missing is just the opposite. You hear if you listen to Practice Makes Perfect, you can hear distinctly who plays what. There's no problem of figuring out which part is played by which person. And there's something about the personality of each element in that piece, and it definitely. I remember it sent shivers up my spine the first time we played it as a band. It was just I just thought, wow, this is it. You can't go back. Once you've done this, you can't go back.
There's a nerdy bit here as well as guitar effects. Mike came back from New York and introduced us to some guitar effects, and we started to get a taste for that, which never stopped. Where you have an original sound, and an original sound can be the inspiration for a whole piece. There's a reason to write a song. Like I Am the Fly being a really good example of this insane sound. We've got to do something with it. It's like, how can you corral it? How can you focus it and push it somewhere? How can we make this a football chant? We didn't.
So whose decision was it for I Am the Fly to be a single? Because it's quite an unlikely choice for a single, isn't it?
Yeah, especially after the demo. I mean, the demo is like just goes off into its own little world. I think it was
Quite
Mike's.
psychedelic.
I think it was Mike's idea, to be honest.
It was very popular. I remember hearing it a lot played.
Yeah.
A lot
It's
of,
the
a lot of punk
chorus.
discos.
It's the football chorus. It's the most stupid bit in it as well. I mean, the verse is
Unfortunately,
quite-
this plan didn't work.
Yeah.
No, it's.
Oh, there's a
no,
lot-
it was like EMI. I guess.
No,
must
no,
have
it was
been
Mike.
and-
It was Mike's. It was Mike's idea.
And Nick Mobbs as well, who we had there. It was an extremely strong person to have at the record company.
Can you remember when we played it? I don't know where it was, but suddenly
Barbarella's, Birmingham.
the audience disappeared, and actually they were all on the floor.
We hadn't seen Tiswas in London. It
But there
was
was-
still local then, and they were doing The Fly. We were playing. It's like, this is our new single. And it's an encore. And we came on, we couldn't see anybody because they were all lying on the floor. When we started playing, they all started kicking their legs. We were just like, what is this? So we didn't understand anything.
A very short-lived dance craze, The Dying Fly.
Well, they did it on then when the TV series or program came to national TV, then we understood. But then we didn't. It was, you walked off with a, I don't know, quite a supportive audience, and then came back and then started playing this thing, and there was nobody there because they were all lying on the floor.
I mean, it kind of shows up. You know, you think about EMI and their kind of corporate, whatever, but they were just so not on the ball.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like a modern joined-up record company would be like, yeah, that's it. That's how to market this band. You know, and it's like they completely just didn't. I mean, we didn't have videos. We could have gone on. We could have had a video on Tiswas of a bunch of kids laying on their backs.
Why didn't we have
You know.
videos? Would they not commit to videos?
Once we went, that's a 154 story. But when we went to them and said, "Can we do a video?" They said, "You can do a promotional film to send to the affiliates,
Yeah.
just of us playing live."
Usually how it was used, John, was in order that people in Singapore could see what Cliff Richard looked like when he was singing his latest song.
I know you're cueing me, Graham, but it's not going to happen. But it is extraordinary that there's so little footage of Wire in the 70s. There's just a rock palast and maybe the Sogos and that's
But
it.
we were trying to say to them, this is a really interesting medium, TV. They said, no, we've tried it. We tried it with the Beach Boys, and it rained.
You can't.
And that was it.
You can't,
We were
you
like,
can't sell music on TV.
You can't, because
we
it
actually
rained,
heard-
and that was that.
Yeah, we actually heard that, and that was I think a year before MTV launched.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
Yeah, we were just and in some ways we were kind of too early doing what we were doing. If we'd have stuck around another couple of years at the end of the 70s, then we would have been all over MTV. We were, but whatever, that's life. That's the way it is. And in a way, it's worked out well for us that we've never had that we've never had that one song.
Well, it's true. If I'm the Fly had been a top 20 song, I think you would have probably all regretted it, wouldn't you? Really?
Oh, absolutely.
It would have been a real
Absolutely.
millstone.
Absolutely.
No. I'd have a director's seat at Newcastle. And a helicopter. Difficult to remember, and this is over to you guys really, it's like how bloody limited the media was, or whatever you want to call it. Because there wasn't media anyway, everything was very separated. You had Uncle John and what was his name? The Canadian guy.
Kid Jensen.
It was Kid Jensen. Kid Jensen loved Dot Dash. Kid Jensen played it, and John played it, and the rest of them, where were they? How's about that?
Playing Cliff.
Playing Cliff.
Well, that's it. History tries to teach us now through TV documentaries that everybody was influenced by punk. Everybody, and really, it was such a minority. It was
They were
such
not.
a minority.
No, they were not.
Yeah.
It's a lie.
Yeah.
There was a truth to, I think, what everybody was I don't know, at least the people who were sitting here were trying to do. There were several people who were not really signed up for that. And the enemy can be a large part of that too.
And also the amount of really, really good music that was around at that time and the competition involved. And the fact that the record companies were, if you like, a little bit behind the speed of development that was going on. Because I remember Dot Dash came out the very same week as more songs about buildings and food.
Mm.
So if you're into this kind of music, you've got a limited pocket money option, haven't you?
Maybe.
Well, not you, John, because
Not
you
me.
said
I was-
everything free.
And I traded most of it for psychedelic records.
Rob, can I
I
ask?
don't know, but you know what I mean? I think it's really important in terms of, you know, there was Dave and Jane and you that we knew at Sounds.
Yes.
And we had endless conversations about how, I don't know, basically we thought people were just like bullshitting and telling lies and writing bad stuff.
But it goes back to what I think it's very important. I think one of the key things is what you mentioned, Graham, which is narcissism. And people, a lot of people always, in every single media, all the time, are doing it just for themselves.
Mm.
And to me, the music I liked and the people I liked were the people who were not doing it just for themselves. They had an idea, they had something they wanted to say, they had a vision which was beyond their own ego. Obviously, we've all got egos, otherwise we wouldn't even be up on stage. But there has to be more than that.
Mm.
And also there's a certain kind of sarcastic humour with Wire that I always liked. But yes, there was a lot of crap. And in a way, it kind of made it easy. If you had, I had a very strong vision as a music writer, which I was then on the weeklies, and I had a very strong vision of the kind of music that I wanted to write about and what I thought was good. And that was fine. It actually just made it very easy. And in the end, I wasn't interested in what everybody else was doing, particularly except to say it was shit, which is part of the fun. And there was a lot of it around. The enemy was terrible. I mean, bloody Birchill and bloody Parsons.
Oh, you got it in one.
Parsons, who now writes pro-Brexit editorials for The Sun on Sunday. Fuck you. Well, honestly, how can you? Did you not ever believe one single fucking word you wrote back in the day? I'm sorry, I'm
I tell you, should have met them back in the day when they were sitting in a corner, crawling and talking to each other.
That may be a subject for a different discussion, but it's a fair point.
I think it's really important because I think there was so many lines which were set up, and the enemy had a lot of power, and it really did.
yeah.
It really fucked up a lot of progress. I think. From like Nick Kent's, what should we say, evangelistic reports from New York, which I remember reading in my local laundrette, and thinking, wow, what's this? To what became this sort of like closed down, mean, dreary.
But also, there's so few outlets at
absolutely.
the time. There's so few outlets, as a consumer, where you're finding information. Not like now when everything's available. There's, like you say, there's John Peel, maybe a bit on Kid Jensen. You've got Sounds, NME, Melody Maker a little bit, Record Mirror a little bit. But really, the information is being filtered through a very thin funnel, isn't it? In terms of what's
Yeah, I was
available.
staggered. John was staggered about Dot Dash. I was staggered by Question of Degree because I thought that was a fantastic single. I still do. And that I thought it was going to sort of be a hit and make a big splash, and it just didn't. And I sort of realised then that something was going wrong. And if you actually now you look back at 78, 79, and there's a lot of really amazing music being made then. But then it was really hard to detect. And I think that in a way that's helped you guys, in fact. Because if you had, it may not have helped you financially, but the album still, as far as I can still stand up fantastically well. Possibly because they weren't overexposed at the time, or they were quite well exposed. But if there'd been that saturation at the time, it would have been much harder.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that comes out of, especially the Chairs Missing special edition, is that if you look at the photography in that, and had the face been around at the time that came out, it would have been a different story. Because it was actually so ahead of its time in terms of the look, the styling, the relationship between glam and normality with the locations that were being used, and also the fact that they all, in those photos, look fucking good.
Yeah.
We did want it to be successful.
Yeah.
You mean commercially successful or just successful?
Successful in all ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was about art.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
But then a lot of music at that point wasn't about art. You know, there's a very small
No.
pool
You
of-
couldn't even say the word art
Yes.
in London without ridicule,
Yeah.
being stoned.
Yeah, well, also the relationship between, say, the speed of development, Pink Flag, and then very short time later, gigs at Janetta Cochrane Theatre,
Mm.
which for me as a student was just like, oh my God. I went down there for one night and ended up going 3 out of the 4 nights because I was just amazed by it. But there were things going on there which were completely ahead of the time as well. You went into the Janetta Cochrane, which is like a theatre next to Central St Martin's in Southampton Row. And as you went in, you were filmed. And you sat down in the auditorium, the small theatrical space, and then 2 minutes later, you saw yourself walking in on screen because there was a delay with the video feed. I mean, that's, really ahead of its time. And the thing at that point had sort of, you'd fallen out with the EMI by then, hadn't you?
They were still on board. They
Yeah,
were
no,
paying.
we hadn't left at that point.
Yeah.
They were still paying.
So for those who don't know, we should say this was a series of gigs you did sort of in the wake of 154, and rather than doing a tour, you did a series of events at the same venue, which were a long way from standard rock performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that all you're going to say?
I mean,
Yeah.
Quite transgressive, really.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, we've moved quite fast, and it seemed all very natural. I mean, as much as you can say, well, yeah, the media were conspiring against us, and we didn't have any hits, and blah blah blah, and
I didn't say that.
but in the end, that's all worked out to our advantage.
Yeah.
And the fact that we were able to kind of move so quickly and not really be censured about what we were doing, it's given us a lifelong ability to do things, which is amazing. And I really honestly think if we'd have, if I Am the Fly had been a hit, then there would be nobody on this stage would be signed up to doing gigs where we had to play the same bloody song every night, because that doesn't. It's just not in the DNA of the band.
Well,
To do it.
what would have happened with people would suddenly see a chance to, within the record company would have seen a chance to make money, and you would have gone down a different route because suddenly everybody's got a vested interest.
Yeah.
And it's not just about what the band wants.
Yeah, it's amazing how in many ways it was all about what we wanted, and what we would just be in a rehearsal.
We were
come
rather
up with
bloody,
stuff.
we were rather bloody minded, but the contemporary we had at EMI was Kate Bush, and she did the same thing.
Yeah.
One thing I really like, I mean, talking about the special editions, which I hope some of you are going to buy because they're really good. One of the things I really like about them is finally you actually get the developmental stages in exact detail. And I was very fortunate at the time that Dave Fudger, when you moved to Virgin Publishing, would give me the demos as they happened. Traitor. No, it was great because you actually had a whole load of new wild stuff, and then by the time the album came out, they were totally different. But I think what I like about them, I like having all the demos now out. And in a way, it's great that Wire have decided to put everything out.
Because there are some real surprises in there. I found, for those of you who haven't heard it yet, there's certain songs you hear in their embryonic form, and they are worlds away. I mean, they have their own majesty, but they're worlds away from the final versions. Again, it's about acceleration of ideas, isn't it?
Well, it just goes back to the beginning. After we'd kind of written the material for Pink. Pink Flag is a snapshot of Wire in September 1977, basically. by October, November, we were already doing different things and moving on, and we had the chance to go in. We would be asked to go in and demo stuff. So that was what we did. We've got these songs on, let's go in and record them, and then, no, we don't really like them anymore, or they should be done differently, or, people would come with different ideas. Stuff would be in the set, and then it'd be out of the set, and it would be like, someone would, come, a month later and say, what happened to that song? I don't like it anymore. So, it would be, but it's.
I think all of that comes with the confidence that we have, then, isn't it? In that way that you think that bit's worth keeping, bin the rest, or something.
Because you knew there's always more on the way.
Maybe it was just, I don't know. It just seemed kind of. I mean, I was a bit miffed when there was a bunch of stuff that was supposed to be on Chairs Missing that didn't get included. But then I began to realise, oh no, that actually I've written better songs than that. So, then it didn't. I mean, Chairs Missing is further away from Pink Flag than 154 is from Chairs Missing in a way. It is a mammoth step in a very short period of time. When you compare the two, but it didn't feel like it at the time. It's just all natural.
Yeah. Rob, can I ask you, on Chairs Missing, there's, compared to Pink Flag, you're playing a range of percussion there, and there's lots of quite unusual instruments on some of the tracks. Was that you going into the studio and seeing these instruments there and thinking, I want to experiment with them? Like on I Feel Mysterious Today, there's a real range of different instruments that you're playing.
No, I think it's Mike Thorn liked to introduce different things. If he could try something else that would add to what you're doing. I think it's different colours, but percussion. He had more percussion to offer than I had. I wasn't really. It wasn't my stuff, but he thought it was a good idea to use it.
But it's still you playing it, though, isn't it? It's not Mike playing it. So, I mean,
no, I played it. Yes, well, Tube of the Bells. Or is it on 154?
No, I think it is Maroon. Has that got Tube of the
Yes.
Bells in it? Yeah. But did you embrace that? Did you have to be coaxed into?
Yes,
Yeah.
I like the new things is what keeps Wire alive, isn't it? I don't think I was conscious of it at the time, but certainly looking back on it, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's got a really good sort of vaudeville percussion quality to it.
It's quite whimsical at points.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, can we talk about the difficult third album then? So 154, which is the album you recorded before you hit a point of hiatus. So at this stage, you've got 3 songwriters, you've got a lot of material, some of it honed on the Roxy tour and so on, but you go into the studio and you basically pull it apart, really. You don't go in to record versions of what you've been playing live. You're really experimenting with the studio by that stage. Graham, you look nonplussed. Is this news to you?
I don't understand that at all. I don't see it.
You don't see that? I suppose to me this sounds to be a lot...
I think we went into the studio, we came off this Roxy music tour we did. And we worked our asses off to survive. And we went into the studio and we could damn well play. That's what Mike said. He said, fuck, we can play now. And we were like, So, what does that mean?
There was still a collision of agendas. I mean, I remember the first thing that Mike said when we walked into the sessions is that he'd been in a meeting in EMI and we should really be recording a series of singles. It's like, well, no, actually, this is the material we've got. Some of it is singles and some of it definitely isn't.
Yeah, we just put our life and soul into this activity. This is what it is, you know. And that's how it could have been. That was the only way it could be.
I mean, there was much more ambition in terms of, like I said in the beginning, when we went to record Pink Flag, I mean, we understood so little about the process that there's a famous story. On the first day, they were basically sound checking the drums, and the rest of us were in the room, and we started just jamming. We were playing, ably assisted by some substance in a jar that Mike had provided, and we were Bruce was convinced we'd recorded the album. I mean, it was like, you know, it was brilliant. I remember it being brilliant at the time.
It was a double, wasn't it?
And then we went into the control room and discovered that they'd only been listening to the bass drum. It was like,
Or kick, as they called it.
and it's like, you know, you're in one stage, because you hear yourself really well. On the other side, you're like completely deflated. You think you've just done something more brilliant than anything you're supposed to record. And they haven't even been listening to it. Nobody's recorded it. That's it. You know. So, I mean, we went from there. So by the time we got to 154, everybody had their own idea about how to make a record. And some of those ideas were not the same as then other people's ideas. And that became a kind of a bone of contention. But it was
And
also
a bonus as well.
it was added layers to the record, basically.
There's a lot more studio intervention, isn't there? Which I suppose is what I was hinting at when I was saying, Graham, again, you're looking downful. You don't.
I out the other window. I think.
Yeah, I know, but I you know what I mean. What John said earlier is that there's very limited evidence of Wire's visual activity, or visual evidence of Wire's activity, and Rock Palast is a very good example of what we were doing, which was in the middle of this Roxy music sojourn. And I think a lot of the material is very, very formed there. And I think that then gave us opportunities to perhaps expand that, or think, could we do something else? You know?
Yeah. I think it was more, and this is a classic Wire thing that still obtains. You have a piece, and you take for example something like Map Reference. I mean that whole arrangement was pretty well worked out before we were in the studio, and then you have something like, I don't know, The Other Window was as a result of everybody listening to it and thinking it wasn't that good. So what could we do to make it better? And that's the logic and the thinking. I mean, it comes with a lot of different attitudes or whatever, but that's ultimately the logic of it. That one's working, but that one isn't so well. So what can we do to make that more interesting? And especially if it's someone defending their writing. So if it's someone who's got a piece and they want to continue to have a piece on the record, then there's going to be a bit of effort made sure that piece will remain, but it's got to change in order to remain.
Mr. Gilbert, The Other Window.
How recently have you listened to 154, Bruce?
It must be a bit of time now. It's something I do. I don't consume music, not even Wire.
But what I mean, it seems that a lot of Wire's aesthetic has been about editing down, removing stuff, paring down, and I get the impression that during 154 there was a lot of very brutal editing of other people's material, or a lot of quite firm criticism, shall we say?
Well, I think from the very beginning, from Pink Flag, it's all about compression, really. What's the quickest way to get to where we're supposed to be?
Yeah.
The simplest way, and the most interesting way, if possible.
Yeah.
It's hard. What's the best idea?
Well, you had so many ideas at that stage. It just
That's
feels
the unfortunate problem.
what
The
is-
advantage.
What's the problem? Having too many ideas.
I've heard that said.
Yeah, there were a lot of. I don't know what.
Too smart for your own good. All of these
Yeah.
things, they're there, but you can't do anything about them.
And the response from EMI was fairly lukewarm to the album, wasn't it? Which
No.
was surprising.
No, Mr. Shepherd, again. When we went to see Mr. Shepherd, he said, "What are we supposed to do with this?" We said, "Oh, you're the head of marketing. That's why we thought you were here."
I mean, we didn't have.
You know, we want TV, but he couldn't decide. He said there were 6 singles on the album. We said, "Isn't that marvellous?" He said,
Yeah.
and EMI were bought by somebody else.
I mean, we didn't really have a concept of how to sell ourselves. And that was more an 80s thing. I mean, for us, it was about, we knew how we wanted to look, we knew how we wanted to sound, we knew what we wanted on the records, but we didn't think about how that operates within the marketplace. You know, we were as far from a band with, you know, 4 Instagram accounts as you could possibly get in terms of, like, you know, we just weren't that, you know, we were on the biggest record company in the world. Surely they knew how to sell it. You know, if they could sell, you know, the Third Ear band, surely they could sell Wire, you know.
So the other thing about 154 that seems very, very prominent is the notion of Europeanness, because the previous year you'd travelled with the Roxy tour. Before that you'd played in Belgium and Holland and Germany, and from talking to you before, it's like you suddenly were able to see Wire in a different context, because we were on a small island and you were seen as too arty, too clever. You went to Europe and suddenly you were being judged on your own terms.
I mean, touring in Britain in the 70s was just awful, basically. You were like the Friday night turn, and, you know, like, it would be like the catering would be like, you know, there's a couple of beers there for the band. You never have time to have anything to eat. You get to the place where you were staying, and you'd have to kind of, you know, get them to unlock it so you could get into the hotel, and then the breakfast would finish at 7:30, you know, when you got to bed at 1 o'clock, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just, everything was miserable about it. And then we went to continental Europe, and suddenly we had a situation where maybe we would play a show, and then after the show the place where we played would remain open. People would stay around, and you would you would have polite conversation with people. You would talk about art. You would talk
Or something very serious.
yeah.
Mm.
It was,
Stroppy.
it was like suddenly we just thought, hang on, this is how it should be. And we felt, in a way, even though we went first to America, we felt that continental Europe, you know, the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, were places where people seemed to appreciate us, and they seemed to appreciate us in a way that fitted us into a larger context. We weren't just the Friday night entertainment. We were taken seriously as being art. We were part of a broader movement of art, and that felt good.
And it was music that we'd already appreciated from Germany. It was that the first place we played in Germany, the Rattingerhof in Düsseldorf. Some years later, we discovered that this was Joseph Boy's local.
Was that more the company you wanted to keep than the...
Well, I didn't know who he was at the time, but there were also obviously people who were in their 70s and people who were 16, like Gabby from
DAF.
DAF.
Yeah.
He lent me his guitar strap because my guitar strap broke. You know what I mean? This was the difference.
Well, I suppose it goes back to what I was saying earlier about, did you feel any kindred spirits were around you in the UK? And it's quite clear that wasn't the case. Whereas I get the feeling you went to Europe and suddenly you sort of saw that there were connections with...
I don't think there's an accident that Bowie and Brian Eno went to Berlin to do what they did.
I mean, there's certainly an argument for, you know, the smart punks who listen to Low and so on. They're the ones that...
This sounds terrible, the smart punk.
if there is such a thing as a smart punk. But the people that...
know, but why isn't there? You know what I mean? It's like the whole punk or whatever it was. You know what I mean? It was like, it's just trying to do some decent work.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying though is there's certain people that took their cue from Low and what Bowie was doing with Iggy Pop and so on, or Kraftwerk and so that was inspiring. Whereas
But meanwhile, with the rest of punk, what was going on was like a sort of like a Rolling Stones reinvention,
yeah, of course,
of R&B, and that's exactly what we didn't want to do, and that's what we were all supposedly trying to do.
Yeah.
It was all about the long max.
It's all about what?
The long max. That was when I really realised we had our own audience. Was when you used to see quite a lot of guys would come with these kind of very long, sort of very Berlin-looking Macs, and it was like that was the look, and it was very, very unpunk. was as
Yeah.
far from punk as you could imagine, and they were all artists. They were all people who did things, and suddenly we did have a context.
Yeah.
But certainly, if we played in London, that's what I describe as touring in Britain is not what it was like in London. We used to play to a lot of people in London, and they were, we went down well, and we had a very appreciative and knowing audience that came to see us.
So after 154, and there was a divergence of opinion, I suppose, with how it would continue with EMI, and so you walked from the label, and you then planned to possibly work doing solo projects and as well as continuing Wire. But then Wire ended up on a hiatus for 8 years. Would it be?
Less.
4.
And it was only 4 years. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, is it fair to say that at that point Wire wasn't really able to contain the collective or your individual ambitions?
I think you're stepping outside the market.
Am I?
Well, actually, no. Actually, some the discs, the extra discs within 154 contain material from that period.
Yes.
So there you go. You see. He knows what he's been working on the project. I think we had this kind of plan that we were going to present EMI with our own imprint. We called it a label, but it was what you call in the business an imprint, which is a wholly managed item, but you choose what's on it. And on that imprint, we were going to have an occasional Wire release, but there were going to be other things, individual records, collaborative records, or whatever, to try and contain the output that was potentially coming from the four of us. And the first thing that was supposed to lead that off was going to be A to Z. And that would already have been planned. I'd done the demos, and then I got a call from EMI to say that it had been cancelled, and that at that point we realised that plan was not going to happen.
That was the signal, really, that there was no chance of doing what we wanted with EMI. You had a very convincing album, I presume.
Yeah.
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 So if they weren't going to go with that, they certainly wouldn't be going with Dome.
No, of course.
No.
Yeah.
That seems a fair assumption.
Just think about it.
Let's just see how we're doing for time. How we're doing. I think if you're amenable, shall we have a few questions from the audience? Does that?
As long as it's not on the results of the football.
There is actually a mic there, so I think so. If anybody's got a question, you have to go and stand at the mic. I don't know how appealing that is. Or you could just shout in a loud voice.
Yeah.
Anybody got any questions they'd like to put to the panel? Yes, to the back.
What's your opinion on the 1 million wave revival of post-punk music at the moment?
What's
you
you
speak up?
Bands
Sorry.
currently-
Did you say 154
Which
as well?
particular?
Oh, I just want to say 154.
Just tell which name artists.
There's girls' names from Belfast. Idols currently, everyone knows them.
Right.
Did you get money out of Elastica?
Unfortunately not. Not a
I mean,
lot.
that's a previous generation. I'm kind of interested. Girls' names. I think I've heard of girls' names. I don't think I've heard them. They're good.
They're good.
Oh, they're fucking fantastic.
Yeah, they're
Fantastic.
good.
All right.
I didn't realise they had
But
form.
well, it's interesting because a lot of bands who are of your seniority, if you want to put it like that, wouldn't be as in touch with what's going on today as you are, because you do this.
Obviously, we're not that in touch.
No, but I was trying to get you off the hook here, Colin.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But I was going to say, through doing your drill festivals around the world,
Yeah.
you actually are giving a platform to lots of new bands quite regularly.
We like music.
Yeah.
Do you?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you have to. I think you've got to stay interested in the medium that you're working in, or otherwise, what's the point? There's never been, this band has never ever been about getting as famous or as rich or as many things as you can consume or as many people as you can shag. It's never been about that. It's been about quite boring stuff. It's about the art.
Yeah.
And
That's a very bad sales pitch.
and if that's what you're interested in, then you're going to be interested in other people who do stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I'm completely obsessed with the guy who's the keyboard player out of Bad Not Good, who's called Matty, who's got a single called Clear, which I've probably played about 8 times today. Which is, it doesn't sound anything like Wire. It sounds a bit like Todd Rundgren. But there is an awful lot of music around now that sounds a bit like Todd Rundgren.
This is a good point to move on.
Yeah. Any questions? Yes.
Just Bruce, whether he misses it, and if he does miss it, which bits he misses.
So it's do you miss being in Wire, and if you do, which bits do you miss?
I suppose the bits I missed was the sort of camaraderie and the laughs, but I certainly don't miss playing guitar at all.
When was the last time you would have played guitar?
I've no idea.
No idea.
Too long ago.
Oh, too okay.
I thought it was like the last 2 years or something, wasn't it?
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Bruce, firstly, many upper return for the day for yesterday.
Oh, cheers.
And also, wanted to know the ideas and the concept that you had behind the main box design and the second leg design that you built to this latest singles box set.
I think it's just one of those things. It was kind of on the back burner. The fossil. First thing I thought of was a fossil of some description, and I was just looking through Smithsonian website, and I saw this X-ray of a fish, and I thought, that looks like it. That looks like it. You know, that's what it should be. That's it's a very striking, simple image. Just a fish. You know.
Is that a kind of a tie into how you felt about Wire's past?
Not particularly. This has been suggested, and I think, well, why not? That's another layer, as somebody suggested. Yeah. It's only a fish.
Yes, young
There's a whole narrative there, isn't there?
Would you consider touring those 3 albums at some point, like doing 3 different?
No, stop. Goodbye. You can buy us a drink later.
I mean, there is a huge business of basically heritage. And if you're in the heritage business, I mean, you've got to be... I mean, it's the same thing of like, you know, would you want to play I Am the Fly every night forever? I mean, you're just not going to do that. I mean, there was a story about there's a Canadian musician called Gordon Lightfoot, and he had some hit. I don't know anything about him. But what's it called?
Sundown.
So he walked on stage in a venue and said and announced at the beginning of the show he wasn't going to play his famous hit, and half the audience walked out. I think we've done quite well. We have an audience we've always publicly announced that we don't do. It's not like we don't play anything old, but we don't do the heritage thing. It's boring. And this is not. You can't be. What we are supposed to represent, and what we're supposed to represent to ourselves, is some kind of freshness and always trying to do something new and trying to find a new way to go about something. And you can't do that at the same time as like living in the past. You just can't. And so it would be compromising for us, for artists, and frankly, nobody would do it. You wouldn't get anyone signed up for doing it, even for a lot of money.
Anybody else? No. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You talked about there being a big step between Pink Flag and Chairs, and the demos for the Chairs stuff sound quite like some of the stuff on Pink Flag. And I wonder if you could tell us if anything specific happened between those demos and the recorded stuff that came out in the end.
It's just more work. You just make more work. And
the effects,
guitar effects, but it's just more work, and things sound better, and we were just brutal. At that time, it really was where if 2 people said, "I'm really bored with this," then it was gone. Really simple.
It was always been about new shiny thing. Here's a new shiny thing. Let's do that because that's more interesting than that.
Because
That's boring.
there's songs like "Love Ain't Polite" and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
Love Ain't Polite. It's comedy. But even like I realise, because I have actually listened to this stuff recently because I kind of had to, like something like your favourite, Mr. Soup. Mr. Soup was certainly by the time we recorded it for the album, nobody was taking it even slightly seriously. I'm amazed it's actually stayed on Pink Flag actually because it's so silly, and even 12XU. I mean that kind of here it
That's
is
marvellous.
again. It's like because we'd already done it.
There's a difference. 12XU is absurdity. That's fine.
Of course, it's absurdity. It's all absurdity. The absurdity is one of the things that and that's one of the things that we've always laughed about as well. It is an absurd thing to be doing.
There is an awful lot of humour in Wire, which seems to go over a lot of reviewers' heads. I've always found Wire amusing, but it's not. It doesn't get picked up on all the time, does it?
If you could have seen us in a van, on tour in a van at various points with people just literally on the floor, just laughing. So Bruce goes this kind of complete silence. He's laughing so hard. There's no sound is emitting from him at all. He's just kind of shaking. It's just like I don't know. It's just it was all about humour. That's the basis of our relationship.
Yeah. So there was another question down here. Which
Yes.
Yeah, I think Bruce said once that one of the most liberating things when Pink Flag was finished and released was that you felt you never had to do it again. Do you feel the same way with the other albums as well? Once you've finished it, that's the statement, and then you can move on.
I think there's an element of that, definitely, because we all have witnessed the way other operations have had to continue doing old material because we were kind of almost obsessed with not repeating ourselves. It felt like always felt like a full stop. Although I'm very fond of some of the things in the past, but you have to move on. That's what we try to do most of the time.
I think we could probably do one more question, if there is one. Yes.
Hi, yeah, I came into this talk a bit late, so I'm not sure if you covered this or not, but as time has gone on, how has your process changed when it comes to songwriting and working in the studio compared to how you started off?
I think there's an element to all Wire records of like a Wire record is about learning how to make a Wire record, and I think on one level that hasn't changed. I think the thing that's probably different over the last 10 years is I think it's quite important to include everybody, because then if you don't include everybody, then somebody's going to feel like that they're not part of a process. So I think that's the only thing that's kind of changed. I think we were more brutal when we were younger. Sometimes people felt, estranged from the process because they weren't part of it. So, but apart from that, I think it's just a lot is it's all about, how can you make something? It's almost impossible to define in a way, because you take I'll come to the band with a song which maybe it's really skeletal, and the band just sort of forms around it. This is a process that's been going on for many, many years, and it's always refreshing if it works. And if it doesn't work, it's really obvious. It's really obvious within 10 seconds. This is not the work of endless discussion, or we should do it like this, or we should do this, or we need to be this kind of group, or whatever. It just is, and I don't know what anyone else thinks about that, but
I think the where are you? There you are. Right, it's better to see you. That's really good. Yes. I don't know. I think as an artist, the creative process is always, there's this mixture of, you've done certain things, if you have, and you're trying to move on, and you build on certain skills, but also you're trying to avoid being, I don't know, greedy from the success of the fortune that you find at some well or something. And to a degree, you also have to trick yourself. And that, I think that's the hardest thing, is you have to trick yourself that you are going to surprise yourself, to find something new, to continue. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointed, I think. So, looking at other people's work, stealing, whatever it is, appreciating, trying to bring those things in.
I get the impression that there's very little debate amongst you when you're putting stuff together. It's quite instinctual.
It's completely instinctive. Yeah.
And yet, White has a reputation for being very cerebral and very analytical. But presumably that comes afterwards.
That's the great fine art tradition. You talk about the work. You can talk endlessly about the work afterwards. But actually, you don't start with the theory.
Yeah.
I don't believe anybody works like that. I mean, maybe someone wants to correct me, but I don't.
It's possible. It's possible. Of course it is.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily work to lead to very interesting work. And even when you try and do something from some kind of, like you start with an idea, or I'm going to do this, this, and this, then you usually end up just adjusting it because it doesn't sound quite right, or it's just doesn't quite tick all the boxes you want to tick. It's it's about, in a way, you just. I don't know.
Bruce, what do you think about conceptual art?
I love it.
Me too.
I do it all the time.
I know. You can't stop yourself.
Okay, well, I think we're about out of time, but thank you for your questions. Thanks to everybody coming along. And please give it up for John Wozencroft, John Savage, Colin Lewis, Colin Newman,